Hi guys, it's Becky, and today I would like to make a torque. And if you don't know what a torque is, this is just an example I have that I'm going to be using as my model. It is a piece of shaped metal that fits around your neck and it rests kind of on your collarbone. And you just slip it around there, and because it's curved, it stays. It just hangs out right there on your neck. It's something that was used in like some of our prehistory extensively by several different nationalities. It was used as a signifier of rank before crowns were a thing for like the Celts and the Picts and people like that in the British Isles and Gaul and all those other places before and during the Roman Empire. So it's one of these things that it's shaped like that. And so I'm going to be using this as a guide as I shape some wire and make this into a torque. So what I'm going to be using to make my torque is some square 18 gauge wire. And I'm using square wire rather than round wire because it's a little bit thicker because of the nature of the shape that it is. It's a little bit thicker and harder, and it will stay better than round wire. And I'm using 18 gauge because 16 gauge will not fit in the pipe chain. So I'm going to be using that. I'm also going to do a little bit of wire wrapping to add my embellishments and to hold some of my shape together with some 22 gauge wire. And I'm choosing copper because it's going to go better with my pipe chain. I'm going to be using this Silversilk pipe chain, which pipe chain is this rubber tube that has fine gauge wire knit around it like this. And this is this kind of like a baby pink tube with copper wire, and it turns it into this really pretty like coral color. And this is a color that I don't normally use. So this was a challenge that was issued for today to make something with pipe chain in a color that you don't normally use. So I'm going to be doing that. For embellishments, I've got some shell. This is dyed shell, and this bead has a hole that goes from the top to the bottom. And I'm going to be using that and this little bead that is another piece of shell with a top hole, drilled hole in it. So I'm going to be using that with the wire, and we're going to form it with this. Now what you can do with these is I'm going to be putting my 18 gauge wire through my pipe chain, and that's what's going to help it hold its shape when I make it into this. Some of the findings that I'm using for it are some of these Silversilk pipe chain ends. It's like a cord end. It has a little hole at the back for your wire to go through, and it fits on the end of the pipe chain like that to finish it off and make it so that you don't have this any pokey outy bits from the wire rubbing against your neck when you're wearing it. So it makes it look nicer. You're going to do that. You can use, there are some bead caps that are shaped perfectly to fit on the ends of pipe chains, so you could use that instead of these. There are also, you can get some cord ends. They'll fit just fine with this, like the glue-in kind or the kind that have a little hole in the end. Or, and this is kind of a fun thing to do, is when you get to the end of your pipe chain, if you've got wire sticking out, you can wrap it around the edge of it. And if you wrap it really tightly in a coil, it covers that as well. So there are different ways of finishing your pipe chain, but I'm just going to use the findings that were made for it. So that's what I'm going to be doing with that. Let me move this out of the way because we don't need it yet. But these are the tools that I'm going to be using. I'm probably going to be using these 6-step bail making pliers, maybe. I've got them handy just in case because I use them a lot for a lot of different things. I may need to straighten out some of my wire, and if I do that, I'm going to be using these nylon gel pliers for that. For bending my wire, I am going to be using some of these chain nose pliers. And for cutting my wire, I am going to be using some flush cutters. And I'm also going to use this for cutting my pipe chain. All right, so let me move these tools out of the way as well, so they are not distracting the camera or casting too many shadows. I'm going to move these up out of the way so that we can get to them later. And we are going to start planning our torque. So for this example, I'm going to be using this as my model for doing this. You basically are going to want to have like an upward swoop, and you're also going to want it to come together near the back, but not too much with your torque. This particular torque is a little narrow. It doesn't quite fit on my neck exactly. And so I was thinking that what I would do is I would form my torque around the outside edge of this when I am forming it. And that way it'll fit better on my neck. And I may just make it a little bit come togethery on the back more when I do this, so that it fits better on my neck, because this fits around my neck, but it doesn't rest on my collarbone the way that a torque is supposed to. So we're going to do that. Right. So let's cut off the amount of Silversilk that we're going to want. Now I'm going to cut it, like I said, I'm going to go around the outside of the torque, but I'm also going to be adding a little decorative swoop in the middle. So that's about how much I'm going to use, and I'm going to give myself a couple of extra inches just in case I need it. And I'm going to cut off that much of my Silversilk. All right. Now that I've got that cut off, I'm going to cut off enough copper wire, the 18 gauge copper wire. I'm just going to straighten it out a little bit while I get this. The Silversilk will slide onto it a lot better if it's straighter. And now let's get this unwound and keep straightening it. All right. I thought about using half hard round, like German style wire, but I'm not really convinced that it will work any better than the 18 gauge will. Now, where I'm measuring it on the edge here, I'm giving myself a little bit of extra wire here, like that's a couple inches, and then measuring my wire against the Silversilk that I've already cut off. And I'm going to also, I'm just straightening this wire out a little bit, give myself a couple of extra inches on this end, so that, because it's always better to have too much wire than not enough. All right, let's move this out of the way. Let's move this torque out of the way. And I am going to need to string this onto my wire. I'm also going to move that out of the way. All right. So it turns out I'm going to need to modify my design, because I can only squeeze about this much Silversilk onto this before the rubber just grips the wire and will not move any further, which is great for it not sliding around after it's been formed, but not so great for me making this. So we're going to have a little break in the Silversilk, and it's going to come along like this, and about there, and like that, and about there, and then we will have our little bit in the middle like that. So let me grab a little bit that I'm going to put on first before we do any of the other wire wrapping or we do any of the other things like that. And I'm just going to have this, nope, a little bit bigger. I'm making sure that the dangle that I make is going to fit nicely in there. And yeah, there's a little bit of a shadow in the way there. That is going to be about there. So let me cut that off. So I'm going to slide this on first, and then this is going to be the rest of the torque. So let me cut these two in half, but this is great because it'll give me a chance to show you guys how to use wire wrapping to cover the edges of your Silversilk pipe chain. All right, I'm going to set those aside, move this to the side, move these away, and we're going to get this into as close to the middle of this as I can get it. So this should work a lot better because once I get it in there a little bit, I can grab the other end that it's coming out of there. You can grab that and pull and slide this down to the middle. All right, now I want to make sure that it is actually the middle. So I'm just gonna measure this side. Looks like I've got 8 inches on that side and almost 8 inches on that side. So let me just scooch it a little bit more. Okay. 8 3/4. 8 3/4. All right. There you go. So now I'm just going to curve it into a teardrop shape. Going slowly because I want it to not be too stressed out. All right, now before I start doing any of my other wire bending, I'm going to slide these caps onto the end. And this is fine because I'm going to wire wrap this bit here before we start shaping the rest of this torque. All right. Now, where these two meet, I'm going to do a little bend with my chain nose pliers. And I'm just going to bend it this way. So it's pointing kind of straight up. And then I'm going to bend this one this way. Right, and then I'm going to meet them together. I'm going to want these to be about as parallel as I can make them. All right. That looks pretty nice. And now I'm going to bend this one kind of towards me a little bit, like that. And then this one I'm going to bend in the same spot, but on the other wire, away from it, in that direction. And now I want to wire wrap this with my 22 gauge wire so that these are buddies and hanging out together. Let me get this a little bit flatter with some sharper bends because it looks a little curved. this. A little bit sharper bend. And a little bit flatter. I'm just doing little squeezes on the actual flat edges of this square wire. There we go. All right, so I've got two bits together. Let's pull off some 22 gauge wire. Now I'm gonna add a little bit of embellishment to the top, and I'm gonna want to create a wire wrapped loop along the bottom. So let's start from the bottom where the wire wrapped loop is going to be to do our wrapping. And I'm just straightening this out and also warming it up. I'm gonna go ahead and give myself like a bit of this to use. If there's a bunch left over, it's fine because I use 22 gauge wire to make ear wires all the time. So even like a couple of extra inches after I'm done making this, I'll be fine. All right, so let's go ahead and cut that off. And I'm gonna make my wire wrapped loop first. And the wire wrapped loop is what I'm going to be attaching a dangle to later. And I'm going to use my 6-step bail making pliers. I'm going to put this about 2.5 inches away from the edge. Chomp it down so that it bends the wire like that. And then wrap this around my smallest loop. Rotate it and continue making it go around like that, like it's a circle. I'm just gonna clamp it right there while I pull my wire around it. I'm just gonna do this a couple of times. And it looks real messy because I'm doing it in front of the camera and not in front of my face. So you can see what I'm doing. One of the great things about this is you can just go in with your pliers and give these wraps a little smoosh to tighten them up like that and make them look a little bit better. And so I'm gonna clip off my excess. Make sure my end is nice and smooth. All right, now this is gonna be hanging down kind of in the middle of my wire wrappy bit. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna bend this actually so that that's not too crazy there. I'm just gonna wrap this like twice around this end. I'm gonna wrap it pretty tightly. All right, and now I have a whole other thing hanging out there between. All right, so I wrapped it twice around that end. Now I'm going to move this over here, and I'm going to wrap it twice around this side. 1, 2. And then I'm coming up behind it, and I'm going to do 3 wraps around this side. 1, 2. I'm just using my finger to kind of move the wire to where I want it to go. 1, 2. And now that it's behind here, I'm going to pull it around on this side. I'm going to do a couple wraps up here. 1, too. And you notice I'm right here where it is kind of bent together. Let me use my pliers and move these down a little bit. I'm just going to squish this down there to tighten this up so that I can fit one more wire wrap around this end, like so. All right, and now I'm going to come up around the back side and do one more wrap up on the top just to keep it together. And while it is wrapped like this, I'm going to smush this so that these two bits stay together. And I've got my little loop in the middle that I'm going to be hanging a dangle to. And this bit here, I want to just make into a coil. Just a little decorative coil to put in the front of this. So I've cut off all but maybe, oh, come on. I'm eyeballing it and I'm terrible at that. So I actually measure it. It's about 3 inches, about 3 inches of wire. And I'm going to start making a curve. I'm just going to use the very tippy tips of these chain nose pliers. I would go use my round nose pliers, but they are in another room. And that's okay, because after I start this, let me get closer so you can see a little bit better. Just really carefully making this a little rounded curve. And then, once I've got my little curve, I'm gonna grasp it with my pliers and push the wire around it. Now I've got this whole contraption here, so I'm trying not to move this as much, which means I'm going to be moving my pliers more. I'm going to be pushing it into my finger where this wire is. And we're going slowly because that is the best way to make your spirals. Slowly, slowly, carefully, carefully. One great thing about using my pliers for this is as I press down on it, it is sort of flattening it and work hardening it as I'm doing this. So I'll be ready to go. When we are all done. This isn't the only spiral that I'm going to be making today. I'm also going to be using it on my embellishment with my shell pieces. We will get to those after we finish the rest of our torque. Okay. So, there it is. I'm just going to press that down flat against there. So I know my wrapping was a little bit messy, but it was there mainly to make sure that this stays right where it is and it doesn't move. And we were able to add a little bit of decorative wire wrapping element to the front of this. Just giving it a gentle taps. And now I'm ready to start shaping the rest of this around my existing torque. So let me move back so you can see more of what I've got done. This is going to be the center part. kind of hangs in the middle of my chest. And then the rest of this will go curve around like this torc and hang, hopefully, off my collarbone. All right, so let's make sure this is nice and flat because it needs to be straight for the, what is it called? You know, the thing. Pipe chain, for the pipe chain to go on. So I'm gonna move these out of the way so that they are not distracting for the camera. And I am going to grab my other pair of end caps because I'm gonna want one of them on here first before I put my pipe chain on. Oh, those aren't my end caps. Where'd my end caps go? These are for a totally different thing. Okay. Haha. My end caps. Oh boy. I'm having a great weekend. Are you guys having a great weekend? I actually went and did some dog sitting for my sister-in-law. They went out of town and they needed somebody to go hang out with their dog. So today's my only really jewelry making day. I wanted to get that. So I've got my end cap on first. And now I can slide. I'm gonna start on that end. Start sliding this on there. And we're gonna go slowly, slowly, because it gets to a certain point where the rubber just grips onto the wire and is like, no, I want to stay right here on this wire. Like you can't even pull it off. All right. But it will work a little bit at a time. Gently, gently. Oof. All right. I'm gripping this entire thing and pinching really tightly so that it doesn't get deformed by me pressing towards this join with this pipe chain. Okay. Oof. And it looks like I might have made my center part a little too big because I'm not going to have enough wire to cover this unless I make a little bead cap, end cap. Yeah, I can just make one with my wire. That'll work. All right, so I've got one end on. I'm gonna do the other end. Okay, so here we are. We now have our pipe chain on all of our wire, and the first part of it has been shaped. It's been wire wrapped, and now we need to wrap the torque part, the part that's going to fit around the neck. So I'm just going to press this up against the bottom of this torque, just kind of bend the wire in this shape. Let's bend it a little bit more. Okay. Bend it up this way. Bend it a little bit more. All right, so now I'm just going to do some fine tuning of my bending. And right now it's not going to rest very nicely on my collarbone in this shape. So what I want to do is start bending up like this. All right, try this one. A little bit wider, then up. Oh yes. I'm trying to bend this the same way that this is. I'm just going to put this against my neck, up on my neck, and see how it hangs. That. That is about the right shape. All right, now let's get ourselves a dangle. All right, for this dangle, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the 22 gauge wire again. And I am going to make the first part of the dangle, which is going to be a wrapped loop attaching this star, but I'm also going to make, as part of the wrap, another coil. So I'm going to want quite a bit of my wire for this. This isn't going to be enough. So I'm going to cut off, I don't know, 8 or 9 inches. I'm probably not going to use all of this, but I'm going to use as much as I can. And then I'm going to want about 3 inches for my coil, which means I am going to make my loop about here. All right, so again, I've got my 6-step bail making pliers. I'm going to grab this here, which bends that towards me. I'm going to wrap it around the top, rotate, and pull it this way. Then I'm going to do one. Nope, I am not going to do that yet. Wait just a minute, because I need to get my my star on there first. Actually, is that? I think that loop might be a little too big. So let's maybe use that for the other loop. And let's stick this on here first, since I'm going to be using this loop to attach it to this dangle. All right, so we've got this on here. I would like for my loop to come about here. So it's going to go the perpendicularly to the way this loop goes, so that when this is hanging from the middle, the star is facing the front. All right, so I'm going to use this larger loop to make my loop. I'm going to want to leave a little bit of room for wrapping. So I'm going to pinch this, bend it over. You know what, I can adjust the orientation of these loops later. And I'm going to pinch this here and wrap it around this larger loop and have it come all the way around. Why are you like this? There we go. That's a good wrap, or that's a good loop. All right, and I've got some room here to wrap. I've also got a much larger hole so that my little star is going to be able to dangle a little bit more. All right, now I am going to pinch the loop right there to keep it from deforming while I'm wrapping. And I'm going to do like 3 or 4 or however many it takes wraps. Oh, actually I want to leave a little bit of room for wrapping here, so let's just do 2 wraps. There we go. And now I am going, actually let's travel our wrap up a little more up here. There we go. That's in a good position for me to make another spiral. So let's start our spiral. Again, just making a little curve. I'm just pinching the very end of this and curving it around. Keeping it tight, 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 tight. To make a little curve. And then I'm just holding the wire and then pushing this curve into it, just a little bit at a time. Spiraling. And this is just going to give us another echo of the spiral. It is at the top of this decorative piece. I'm going to have it hanging out with our little star friend right there. So let's curve it in a little bit more. All right, so the star is hanging out there. And now my spiral is hanging out right in front of it, like that. Okay. The next thing I want to do is reorient these loops so that they are perpendicular to each other, which means turning this so that this loop goes like this. And my dog apparently needs something, so I will be right back. Okay, dog's taken care of. Let's get this attached this way, which means I've got to go in through here, and then everything's gonna rotate around. And there we are. All right, spatial reasoning. Hooray. All right, I gotta wrap my loop. And oh boy, that's gonna be lots of fun with all of this other stuff in the way. Maybe I should have done this before I shaped the rest of everything, but nah. What's the fun in that? All right, so wrapped loop around everything. All right, and I am not gonna make another spiral because I feel like I have spiraled enough today. I am going to, love this. I love that this is turned this way so you get like this gorgeous bit of it. I mean, it's beautiful on the other side too. I love that color, but I kind of love this sheen a little bit more. So let me snip my excess. Do some squishing with my pliers to take care of this edge. All right, this end. All right, now let's finish off the ends. I'm gonna come out a little bit so we can see. Let's finish off the ends of these. I am going to take this plier and I'm going to bend my 18 gauge square wire back on itself like this. So that it's only rounded edges that are poking out. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. It seems a little bit long. Let me cut off the end just a little bit. There we go. I'm going to use my 22 gauge wire to make end caps. I'm going to spiral it around and make end caps on the ends of my wire, on the ends of my pipe chain, because I only had, oof, why are you not fitting right? Okay. I only had 4 of these copper end caps and they are used right here on this end. So let me just grab that and pull, because that was coming undone there. Let's do the same thing over here. Let's just make sure that the pipe chain is fitting correctly. All right. Okay. I'm just going to twist this down a little bit more. There we go. That way that won't slide up towards the edge a little bit. All right, hold on. All right. Now that that's all set and all of this is good to go on the bottom here, because it was a little bit loose, so I had to move it a little bit more. Now I am going to pull out my 22 gauge craft wire, and actually I think I can do it with my excess bit, part of my excess bit. Maybe that's enough. Let's find out. So we're going to start with 22 gauge wire, and I'm just going to start wrapping it around the 18 gauge wire up here at the very top. I'm going to wrap it so it gets attached. I'm going to start wrapping. Let me squeeze this a little bit so that it is where I want it to be and so it doesn't move. Whoop. And I'm just going to keep my wraps right next to each other. So I wrap around the top of this. I'm just going to cut off my little pokey outy bit right there. Smush that in so it's not in there. I can keep going until I have covered just going to smush these together so that the coil stays right next to each other. Wrap it so that it covers all of the edge of my pipe chain. All right, and now I'm going to cut off my excess. Here's the thing about the pipe chain is it is a little bit forgiving. Like if you squish it, you can indent into it. So I'm going to take this little edge, my cutoff edge, and I'm going to press it into the pipe chain like that. And that means that it will not rub against anyone's skin or catch anything. And that is how you make a cap for your pipe chain using craft wire. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. And my torc is done. Let me move back so you can see the whole thing. So here's my torc. And it is similar-ish in shaping to this. And it sits really nicely on my neck. And I've even got my little dangle right there in the middle. Anyway, this was a fun experiment. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.